Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Americans, and everybody else, welcome back to the Jack Rose Show. Good morning, Sunday morning, and all of that happy jazz. I've got a nice cup of coffee and a slightly carbonated beverage, and I'd like to talk about something that was kind of making the rounds in the news not too long ago. It's been an ongoing topic of argument for the United States for well over a decade, and that is student loans. Student loans and student loan forgiveness specifically. So, way back in the days of the Occupy movement, right around the time that I was starting college, actually, uh, trying to get into the University of Houston and go to business school, there was a whole lot of stuff going on in a little place you might have heard of called New York. Zuccotti Park and all of the wild craziness that was going on there. Now, I remember following all that stuff and going, hey, there are some things here worth talking about. There are some things here worth considering. I was not a huge fan of any of these solutions that anybody was putting forward. Well, with the exception of a very few, and those solutions were extremely unpopular, like no more student loans, period. Get the federal government out of funding the universities so that they can rake in buku extra bucks and do things like jack up their tuition year over year over year. It doesn't necessarily benefit the students. I do remember when I think it was my second year at the university, they had increased tuition. I don't offhand remember the exact percentage because this was about a decade ago. And the reason that they increased the tuition wasn't necessarily that they needed to, it was so that they didn't actually change their profit margin when completely demolishing and rebuilding a parking garage from the ground up. Now, that parking garage actually needed some very serious modifications. Um, they had to do a whole bunch of stuff with ADA compliance, and there were foundation issues, there were structural issues. The damn thing was old, okay? And so it's understandable that they needed to tear it down and rebuild it. The problem is that they could have torn it down and rebuilt it with the money that they had, with the income that they had, and it wouldn't have hurt the university at all. But they also wanted to recruit more professors from around the world, and they wanted to increase the salaries of certain administrative individuals in various roles. They needed more income for all of this. So what did they do? They raised the tuition rate, and they still actually came out, well into the green, having not spent all of the new money that they had brought in, even with a complete renovation of this parking garage. Stop and think about all that for a minute. This is a university. They're running it like a for-profit business. Huh. Funny how that happens. Funny how that happens, right? You think that doesn't happen at other universities? I can guarantee you that it very much does. At the end of the day, it's all about the fucking bottom line. And if they've got money coming in from the federal government, they will absolutely take that into account and normalize their behavior around it. Another issue I have with student loans are the interest rates. Frankly, you're borrowing money from the taxpayer when you're borrowing money from the federal government. And federal student loans are loans made by the government. The government has no product, okay? They have no money, not of their own. They have to take money from us, from the taxpayer, in order to use any money for anything. Their only other recourse is just manufacturing it, printing it out of thin air, um, just putting the zeros in the spreadsheet and saying, "Oh, look, here's another $1 trillion that magically popped into existence because we wanted it to." These are not sound fiscal policies, and so realistically, the only way that the federal government ever has any money at all is by taking it first from the taxpayers or borrowing against future taxes. It's kind of a problem. That kind of debt spending is why our fiscal situation looks the way it does. And it hasn't improved at all since the 90s. In the 90s, we were actually on track to begin considering genuinely budgeting out, balancing out our budget and reducing our debt over time. We're nowhere near that now. You cannot look at the debt to GDP ratio of the United States and with a sane and rational mind consider it anything short of absolutely astounding. And frankly, it should be terrifying. That's just my opinion. At the end of the day, what it boils down to is the government is borrowing against future taxes to yoke young people into taking loans that they may or may not ever be able to afford to pay back, especially with the interest that gets tacked onto it. That's the federal government borrowing against future taxes and then telling them that you not only owe what you borrowed, you owe extra so that they can make a profit. That is slimy. That is scummy and corrupt, okay? If you're a bank and your business is moving money, lending money, and money has a price, I understand the federal government is not a bank, okay? The federal government is not a bank. That is not how they're supposed to operate. So I have an issue with the interest. You borrowed what you borrow, you should have to pay back what you borrowed. I don't have a problem with that. See, the big issue here is not you got yoked into a bunch of loans that you might not be able to pay back. Look, that was voluntary. Nobody said take the loan or we take your car. Nobody said take the loan or it will be utterly impossible for you to do X, Y, or Z. Nobody said take the loan or we'll throw you in jail. This was not coercion. Every single person, including me, by the way, who ever took out a federal student loan did so voluntarily. You borrowed the money, it's up to you to pay it back. It's just like any other debt that you voluntarily incur upon yourself, be it a car, be it a house, be it furniture, doesn't matter. Okay, when you borrow 20 bucks from your friend and you say, "Hey, I'll get you back in payday on Friday. Thanks for, helping me be able to make ends meet this week." You pay him back to 20 bucks. This is absolutely no different. All right. My biggest issue, however, with any kind of loan forgiveness, and look, there are a million memes going around. Some of them are actually clever. Some of them are actually kind of funny. I particularly like the one with the Shiba dog on it that says, "Well, no shit, you didn't want to pay back your college student loans. We don't want to pay them back either." And actually, I think I've got it reversed. I think it's, you're surprised I don't want to pay back your student loans. Well, you don't want to pay them back either. And I found that one kind of funny because it actually is true. And look, I know it's hard, you know, and at this point, we've had roughly 2 years of the interest rates being frozen and the required payments not being required for most people. And if you think that the majority of loan holders, the people who actually borrowed the money, if you think the majority of them have not normalized their spending and their saving habits around not having to pay that bill, you're crazy. They almost absolutely have in almost every case. Okay. That's, you know, That's just one of those things. It's human nature. You don't have to pay the bill. You're probably not going to pay the bill unless you're just that super responsible, honor and duty bound kind of person. And quite frankly, I don't think the majority of Americans are these days. I think the majority of Americans, especially the ones who take out these loans and then cry about having to pay them back, well, they don't know the first thing about the concept of self accountability, duty, responsibility, honor, integrity. These are not watchwords for them. These are platitudes that they like to throw around, but they don't live by them. They don't actually know what they mean, not in any real deep sense. And that's probably going to piss some people off. I actually don't care. Be offended, not my problem. Okay, so back to the point. Federal student loans, the interest rates, all this other kind of stuff. And now we've got a situation where the federal government, specifically the President of the United States, is talking about forgiving a very large chunk of money. Now, there were rumblings about this over the last few years, and there were rumors about how the IRS was looking forward to handling this. Some of you out there may or may not have had to deal with the IRS in a you owe them money capacity in the past. I have. Uh, I'll tell you that story in a second once we kind of lay out the point here. The IRS wants to treat loan forgiveness as income. Now, this income wouldn't be sustained. They would treat it like a windfall, but they would be taxing it as income. And they're not going to tax it separately from the rest of your annual income. No, they're going to add it all together as your gross revenue, and they're going to tax the whole thing. And for most people, that's going to change their tax bracket. And for most people who have taken student loans and have been paying on student loans and may be in a position to where they still owe as much money after a certain number of years as they did when they initially took out the loan. For some people, it's even more, okay, because of the interest rates. When the government forgives the money, the IRS says, oh, you've had a $20,000 or a $10,000 windfall this year. We're adding that onto your revenue, and that's going to bump up your tax bracket. And now you owe us taxes that you didn't stop to think about when you accepted this free income. Well, now you're in a position to where you probably don't owe as much money, but unless you can pull that little bit of extra out of your savings, and many of you probably can't, you now owe the IRS money. And when you owe the IRS money, you accrue fees and penalties real fast. The interest rate is compounded and it's not kind. Okay. You don't want to owe the IRS that kind of money. I've been in those shoes. I was an independent contractor for a few years doing, uh, well, it doesn't really matter what I was doing. The company that I was working with was being run in such a way, and they were running their finances in such a way that even though I was setting aside an appropriate amount for taxes, and I should have been able to have everything covered at the end of the year when I took all of my information to a tax prep attorney and had him go over everything and dot the I's and cross the T's. The best that he was able to do for me was me walking away owing the IRS thousands of dollars in Social Security taxes. Yeah, yeah. I had done my math, and actually, my employer at the time was, well, he wasn't holding up his end of what he actually should have been setting aside and paying to the IRS on my behalf because there were actually legal statutes that were incumbent upon him, and he was unaware of this, supposedly. And really want I didn't want to sour that relationship that I had with him personally, going through the legal hell of suing him for those monies, which actually at that point in time I strongly considered. Okay, but at the end of the day, it would have made it just would have made my life worse, and it would have hurt other people as well. So I decided to bite the bullet and deal with the IRS instead. Thankfully, my next job was a combination of W-4, W-2 with some withholding and independent contracting. And it allowed me to make enough money on my withholdings and set aside enough money for my independent contracting that I was able to pay the whole thing off in about a year. But most people that get in that deep with the IRS are not in that kind of a position. This stuff gets dragged out for a really long time. And when you're in deep with the IRS, it's pay the bill or you're really going to lose something. When you don't pay your college loans, you can get into trouble, but you can't get into that much trouble. You basically just destroy your credit. When you get into debt with the IRS, they'll take your fucking house. They'll take your fucking car. You will go to jail for not paying those bills. Okay? And as nice as their helpers can be when you are paying your bills and doing your best to give them their extortion money, they get real nasty real quick when the teeth come out because you're not paying your bill. And so if you think that, oh hey, they're going to knock 10,000 or 20,000 off my student loans and that's going to be great. If you think that doesn't come with a price, you need to look at your accounts and go, am I prepared to add that percentage in taxes that I will then owe to the IRS? Am I prepared to have that load of IRS debt? This is why, even though, as I said, I did take out federal student loans and I still owe on them. I've been paying them off for almost 10 years. And I will be paying them off slowly but surely, probably until the end of time. I've understood that. I made that decision. If I ever get into a situation where I can pay them off completely, that will be wonderful. But at this point, it's just another bill that I have to pay, and I have normalized that in my accounting. I don't want to take their thousands of dollars in loan forgiveness for the simple fact that I do not want to have to owe that extra money to the IRS. I do not want to have to go, well, here was my tax bracket before, here's my tax bracket now, these are the extra taxes that I will owe. This is income that's got to come out of one of my accounts somewhere. Is this going to hurt my ability to pay the property taxes that keep the county from taking away the house that I own? Is this going to hurt my savings? Is this going to hurt my ability to, provide for my family? Maybe. I do not want to be in debt to the IRS. I actually have a very good friend that has been a good friend for, almost 15 years now. And she is in deep with the IRS. Same kind of situation with being an independent contractor, and she's got it a lot worse than I did. I'm not going to throw all of her details out there, but this is actually where this little short podcast came from. Was a long conversation that I had with her about a week ago, talking about her situation with the IRS and her being aware that a lot of people do not take this into account. They don't seem to be aware of this potential problem. And as much as, she's all for helping people and for people receiving help when they need it, this is a dangerous double-edged sword, and she doesn't want to see any of her friends or anyone else that she would care about wind up in her situation with the IRS. I will say, Again, like I said, I'm not going to put all of the details of her situation out there, but I will say that in her situation, her interest compounds daily. And she doesn't know if she's ever going to be able to pay off what she owes to the IRS. That's a scary fucking thought. That is a really scary fucking thought, especially considering the fact that if she misses out paying them enough money to make them angry and for the teeth to come out, well, that's prison time. That's prison time, and that's not a good feeling to have. And she doesn't want to be in that situation. So her and her husband are very, very careful to make sure that that bill always gets paid on time. I don't want anybody else to wind up in that situation, and I certainly don't want to be in it myself. So I don't want the loan forgiveness that they're offering. And I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to tell you what choice you should make. I will say that you should really do your homework and don't just jump to grab the shiny thing because it's shiny. You need to figure out whether or not this is actually going to help you or hurt you. Anyway, I think I've said enough about this, and just roll it over. All right? I could keep going on about this topic for quite a long time, but I don't really feel it's necessary. I think I've said everything that I needed to say, and I hope that this helps someone somewhere. I hope that someone somewhere finds this valuable. So consider it. If you liked it, uh, you know, little thumb, all that kind of stuff. Like, share, subscribe, all of the channels, YouTube, BitChute, Rumble, all that good shit. I've been Jack, you've been you, and as I said, hopefully you got something out of this, and hopefully it was something that is helpful. If not, well, not my problem. If you didn't like this, tell me why down in the comments section below, and, argue amongst yourselves. Have a good one.